Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us from all over the world. My name is Emily Best. I'm the founder and CEO of Seed&Spark. I'm actually on vacation this week, which is a very rare occurrence for me. And ironically, I'm coming to you from quite a coastal place, which is Bodega Bay, California. And this is the Creative Sustainability Session with the wonderful, amazing, and spectacularly talented Jeff Nichols. These sessions are designed to really help you move forward on your creative journey wherever you are. And we mean that geographically and philosophically and existentially. I'm coming to you from the occupied territory of the Miwok Indian. They are the indigenous community that occupied this land long before anybody who looked like me got here. I really encourage you to download the Native Land Acknowledgement app. It helps you look wherever you are geographically, certainly in the US and Canada, and know on whose land you are actually sitting. It's nativeland.ca. Can't recommend it highly enough. But you are not here to listen to me talk, so without further ado, I would like to welcome to the screen Mr. Jeff Nichols. Hi, Jeff.
Hi. Hi.
How's it going?
It's going really well.
And you are joining us from?
Well as can be. I am in Austin, Texas right now.
Great, and that's your home for how long?
Yes. Well, I've been here, I moved to Austin in 2002, so a long time. But I've been, I have to go away to make movies and then I come back, so I don't,
We're going to talk about that a lot today. I just wanted to acknowledge that there are folks joining us from Germany, the Netherlands, Argentina, but more importantly, from Little Rock, Arkansas, Hot Springs, Arkansas, Smackover, Arkansas. If that is a real place, I'm really excited about that. I saw Cabot, Arkansas. I saw a bunch of folks, a bunch of friends from Little Rock, Jonesboro. Camden, Maine. That's where I made my first movie. El Dorado, Arkansas. Many folks in Austin, St. Louis. This is really amazing. I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody, but there's just, this is the beauty actually of this time. I mean, the last time I saw you, we did a creative sustainability session in Little Rock. And it's, well, in Conway, technically. And it's really exciting to actually be able to bring this kind of session everywhere. Yes. And I really wanted to start at the beginning and just say, how did you figure out that you were going to be an artist coming where you came from?
Yeah, well, it was a bit of an evolution, to be sure. I consider myself a late bloomer when it comes to certainly reading and writing as well. I used to kind of write short stories and things growing up, and getting into junior high and high school especially, I started doing that more. But I'd never written a screenplay until I went to film school. I'd never been on a film set until film school. There really wasn't a really accessible or represented film community in Little Rock when I was growing up, at least not one that I knew about or had access to. And so for me, it was really just this extreme love of movies, which I'm sure pretty much everybody listening can agree with. I was the kid that would go and see everything every week. We would open the paper back when they put movie listings in the paper, and I would have seen everything maybe twice. That was something my father and I really loved to do, is just go to the movies together. But even in that regard, Little Rock was it was mostly multiplexes at that time. We didn't really have an independent theater when I was growing up. Maybe we had an independent video store as I started to get into high school. So, the concept of filmmaking for me growing up was really big, blockbuster movies growing up in the 80s and 90s. And it wasn't until I was in high school that even the concept of independent filmmaking and even the concept of regional or even American filmmaking really struck me. And I guess because in the mid 90s, when I was looking at colleges, the idea of film school just sounded interesting to me. Looking back, I don't know, I just didn't really, I probably didn't give it as much thought as I should have, because I didn't have any context to apply, to that thinking. And I only applied to 2 schools. One was North Carolina School of the Arts, and the other was, gosh, I can't even remember the other college I applied to. Anyway, I got into film school, and that was really the beginning of, my wrapping my head around the idea of being a filmmaker, understanding what it is first and foremost, but then really starting to grapple with the idea of, oh my gosh, this is something I want to do, and this is something I can do. There were definite, milestones in my life and my career where I started to realize this is not a joke. This is not a silly idea. This really could happen and could mean something. I think the first was getting into a film school. For me, certainly not everyone needs to go that path, but for me, that was really important. I needed that kind of structure. And then at my film school, 2 years in, everybody kind of takes general classes for the first 2 years. And after your second year, they kind of put you in a category. And I made it into the directing program, which is a pretty, I think there were only 8 of us that made it into that program. And that kind of felt like, oh, wow. That was my first really bit of affirmation, which definitely came from the outside, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but it happened and I took advantage of it. And then in my junior year of college, I got an internship with the American Pavilion and Kodak to go to the Cannes Film Festival. And I actually waited tables in the American Pavilion. And but I got to see the Cannes Film Festival at work.
Wow.
And I think that kind of blew my mind a little bit, just in terms of being able to have that was really my first connection with the success of the industry, and my mom bought me a tux at JCPenney, and I would go to the Palais, and I got to watch, Cannes competition films, and I got to see famous people come into the restaurant that I was waiting tables at the American Pavilion. But it started to feel more tangible for some reason. And then this kind of final thing happened as it relates to film school, and that was a guy who was a couple of years ahead of me, named David Gordon Green, came out and made George Washington. Mm-hmm. And he made that the summer after my sophomore year, I think. And he was the first one from our group that actually made it. When I saw him being interviewed on national, TV programs about his film, and I could talk up to a stranger about George Washington, that really felt like, okay, this is something I can do. And it really took a long time. I remember I'd filmed my first film, Shotgun Stories, and was back down here in Austin editing it. And I would run into people and they would say, what do you do? I would say, I make movies. And I would kind of giggle, and it just still seemed absurd, even though I'd made one, like it just took such a long time. And I think it's an important thing to note, especially in this conversation, because it didn't necessarily need to take that long. But for me, it really did. And do
you mean to take that long to acknowledge that you were a filmmaker and that was what you were going to do?
Correct. Even though, I remember having a conversation with a girlfriend in college near like my senior year, and she was at like a liberal arts college, and she just kept asking me like, well, what if you don't make a movie? I said, but I am going to make a movie. And she said, but what if you don't make a movie? And I just was kind of stumped, like that the possibility for her, because she hadn't gone through the things that I had gone through in terms of those milestones. For her, it really was kind of a pipe dream and did seem kind of like this crazy idea. And so I, even though it took me a while to wrap my head around it, the same way as my decision to go to film school, it did seem somewhat inevitable. So these two, competing ideas in my head, it was interesting, an interesting battle, I guess, that I was going through.
I'm so fascinated by this because I grew up in Sacramento, California, which is the sort of California's forgotten city, right. Even though it's the capital. And I had no sense, even though I guess we were home to Molly Ringwald. That was like our big claim to fame. But my understanding was always she came up through the like Broadway avenue. So if you were singing and dancing, maybe that was your avenue. But I had absolutely no sense whatsoever that you could be an artist for a living. Like that was completely foreign and interesting to me. But like it just wasn't available at all. And I remember I would go to the Tower Theater with my friends in high school, and I remember seeing this movie by Makhmalbaf, which I was not the cool kid being like, let's go see this Iranian film. It was like a friend of mine dragged me there, and I sat in the theater, and I remember being so stunned. And there are a couple of things that are interesting to me about this. And one is like having an independent theater around that can teach you like what film can be is one thing, but also to your point, having the person from your crowd who does it before you is so important. And now you are that for so many people, right? Like you are that for so many folks in Arkansas. I'm going to jump around here because I think this is actually a really important moment just to talk about like what you're doing with Arkansas Cinema Society in terms of making that example for other folks and making it more possible.
Yeah. So, because I moved to Austin, I was exposed to the Austin Film Society, which Richard Linklater helped create. And I was really, really impressed with Linklater personally and his kind of philosophy toward community and communities of filmmaking. He's such an open, kind of giving soul. And I was really, though, impressed at the impact that the Austin, Film Society was having on this community. When I got here, Austin was in its boom years for sure, but it seemed like the film community was very connected. I felt part of it when I was down here, and it was something that when we were making Shotgun Stories back in Arkansas in 2004, there were lots of people that I would talk to, mostly related kind of to the music scene. There was a pretty good punk rock scene in Little Rock in the late 90s, and those people were interested in such a thing, but it didn't feel like it didn't have any unifying form at that point. And I had actually gone back with Loving to do a screening in Little Rock. I tried to take all of my films back to do personal screenings there. And honestly, there just wasn't even like an email list, like people to just say, hey, you would go do the local news and stuff, but there was really no, it really kind of made me realize like, oh, there is no unified community here. Of course, there was the State Film Commission, but that has a different job, that has a different purpose in terms of attracting business. It's about economic development. And I really wanted a place where people interested in making films and telling stories visually could chat and hear from people that had really done it. And maybe those hurdles that I had could break down faster as a result. And I paired with Catherine Tucker, who's our executive director. And, we were spitballing about the Little Rock Film Festival, which the Renault brothers had created, which was a fantastic festival, but sadly had shut down. And it was like, well, she wanted to start a festival. And I was like, what if we did something that was a little bit more year round? And sometimes, as great as film festivals are, and I've taken my career is based off of them, sometimes they feel like you're there for a year or you're there for a weekend or 2 weekends and everybody crowds in. It's about parties and stuff, and then everybody's gone. And I really wanted a kind of a continuing conversation throughout the year, and we're still working to achieve that. And it's programming is year-round programming is the hardest thing to kind of keep up, but that's the goal of it. That's what we're trying to do. And Catherine's really, and the community at large, honestly, has done a really good job kind of activating and responding to it.
Yeah, I feel like every film community does need a Catherine who is, among other things, a super connector.
Yeah, for sure.
Because we came to town and she was like, here are the 37 people you will need to know. We'll get them all in a room. And by the way, I will have my friends provide the single most glorious buffet I have ever seen in my entire life. You guys, I wept when I walked in. I had to like hide my tears because I was hungry and it was amazing. Well, so I want to talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities. So walk us through your films and where you shot each of them really quickly.
Yeah, so Shotgun Stories was my first, and it was a pure independent film financed through kind of friend and family money. And we shot that in Southeast Arkansas. We were based out of Little Rock and kind of satellited almost an hour out from Little Rock. And then Take Shelter was written to happen in Arkansas, but because one of the producers was from Ohio and was putting together some of the money, I had to go to Ohio, which was a fine place, and then and then Mud, of course, was written very specifically to take place in Southeast Arkansas on the Arkansas River, and that we worked pretty hard to get that in Arkansas because at the time everything was shooting in Louisiana, and someone told me that the Mississippi River also ran through Louisiana, and I had to just kind of shut that knowledge out and continue to push. And thanks to the governor and the whole state really stepped up to help us get that film there financially and make it financially viable. And then Midnight Special, we did go to. We're based in New Orleans to shoot, and I should say in Mud also we were primarily based in Stuttgart, Arkansas. Shout out to Stuttgart, and
which probably doesn't get that many shout outs if we're going to be honest.
I don't know. It's the rice and duck hunting capital of the world, so just not usually in these forms. And and so Midnight Special was a road movie that really was supposed to take place from West Texas to the Florida Panhandle, and so it actually kind of made sense to base out of New Orleans because we ended up shooting. We didn't shoot any in Texas, sadly. We had to go to New Mexico, which was just, it was great to be in New Mexico, but it was disappointing not to be able to shoot in West Texas. And but then we also shot in Florida and we shot a little in Mississippi. So we really were shooting a kind of a road movie. We were all over Louisiana. And then Loving, of course, took place in Virginia, and it was very important to us to go. We were based in Richmond, which was a beautiful, beautiful city, and so much history. And we actually shot very much around the places that Richard and Mildred Loving existed. So yeah.
I mean, this is incredible because I don't feel like you talk to that many filmmakers who are like, I'm from here, I shoot here, that's what I do. Like, you're clearly really dedicated to the region. And I'm sure part of that is like, that's what you know. But I'd really like to hear about kind of the challenges versus opportunities, right? So what are the challenges of really creating where you're from when it's not, as heavily resourced as New York or Los Angeles, or at this point, Austin, Atlanta, New Orleans, and what are the advantages?
Yeah. Well, the answer evolves as the scale of the productions evolve, because I actually think regional filmmaking on a smaller budget is absolutely the way to go, and I think it starts to open up just so many advantages. They're kind of innumerable, but we'll try, not only specificity of place, but then also resources, local resources. I have no problem with asking, my parents cooked the food and picked actors up, and we put people in. Someone gave us an empty rental house that, my dad owned a furniture store, and we moved mattresses in with. We kept the plastic on so that they could go take them back. I'm pretty sure that's illegal, but we took them back, sold them. And you have, unless you're just a complete asshole, like you usually probably have a pretty good resource list regionally. But way more important than that, even, although that's huge, is you have this specific place that nobody else is filming at. It depends on where you live, but even if you live in a place where a ton of people are filming, say LA, you might have a different point of view of LA that no one's seen before. So it really isn't, yes, this conversation is specifically about non-coastal things, but it's really about your personal view of the world. And that's the biggest advantage of making something locally. Is because you're going to see a place through your eyes, and that is going to that is going to excite people. That is going to interest people, because like the first time, I saw Chunking Express, it was like, wow, this is, I don't understand how they made this movie, like, or Ramin Barani's film Chop Shop, like, that's a film made, I suppose, in New York, but like I had never seen any of that before. And so I think it's really important that that you look at the space around you for what means a lot to you, but also what is most interesting. I mean, I hadn't really worked on the fish farm that we shot at in Shotgun Stories, but I'd seen it because a relative owned it. And I was like, this is cool. Like, this needs to be in a movie. This is an interesting place. So to continue the answer, as it evolves, bigger budget movies, they're designed to control the environment. So you bring in all of these people and all of this infrastructure, and if they want to stop traffic, they stop traffic. And if you need extras in the background, you hire them. If you want a car to pass by in the background, you have to go hire that and a driver. And it's a really big pain in the ass. And it gets much, much harder to have the integrity or the sincerity of realism baked into your films. And because you can't have, say, Brad Pitt. Or in our case, Reese Witherspoon, it's hard to walk her around, although she absolutely did. And people spotted her all over Dumas and Southeast Arkansas. But it was, it's more, there's just more overhead. There's more infrastructure. And so regionally keeping those projects there, that really is about crew base, and it's about, sadly, tax incentives, which I hate to talk about, but like, you have to kind of lay out this equation of this is what it's going to take, to shoot in this place. Because if you do not have a crew base that is large enough, you're having to bring people in and house them and travel them and give them per diems that you wouldn't have to give to them otherwise. And so there is a compounding factor. I've always found it's worth it. I also really love to go to places where the community enjoys the fact that you're there. We all know, everybody on this chat list knows that movies can be like locusts, and they can be really destructive in various ways to a community, and especially bad film crews that go in and destroy a home and don't take care of it or whatever. And I imagine there's some people in Ohio that would consider us that way for Take Shelter. We did dig a very big hole in the ground and drop a shipping container. But like, you have to, like, it's nice to be in a place where people think the idea of making a movie is cool, as opposed to being, honestly, with all due respect to New Orleans, it was really like, oh, you're with the movie? This costs 3 times what you were about to pay for it. There are,
It's sort of like planning a wedding all of a sudden.
Yes.
You're like, wait, but I know how much that thing costs. You can't possibly be charging me that much.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I shot my first movie in Camden, Maine, and Camden, Maine, the first time they got on the map was with Peyton Place. But then I believe, and not to talk ish on another production, but I believe Thinner, or it was a Stephen King movie of some kind, shot up there and just demolished the town. Like, had a giant, one of those 4 million watt lights in the center of downtown for just night after night, and nobody slept, and it was super noisy. So when we came to town, tiniest production in the world, there was like an 11-person crew. I spent 2 weeks just befriending everybody at town hall and the fire department, and like anybody I thought could be called on us should we misbehave. I went and I think it was graft what I was doing. I was like bringing them stuff. I was offering them. And what ended up happening, which is really amazing, is in a couple of scenes, the fire department came out and were like background extras, which made us look so much more legit as a production. Right. Because like the whole point was that the town was coming together around this funeral. So it's an indie movie. So we had to shoot it. We're white people. We had to shoot it in a cabin around a funeral. Like, that's how most white people make their first movie. Let's be honest. Right. And so I just remember like there was a local car dealership that gave us the 2 picture cars, but this local used car dealer asked to read the script for this like indie movie about these female friendships. And he finished reading the script and he was like, I found it really touching. And these are the cars that I think the main characters would drive.
That's awesome.
And we agreed with him and he gave them to us. You know, amazing. So like I know that, but it's a very different kind of hard work than the big production, control the environment hard work. And it's much more relationships based.
For sure.
And like, you can't, particularly if it's your hometown, you can't F it up.
Right. Which is good. You know, it's good to have that pressure on you for sure.
Yeah, I think that's like sort of a charm of it. But I want to talk a little bit about state support, because I think it's interesting. You said, you know, you got like members of the government on board to help you bring a production home. And my experience has been like, you don't have to already be somebody to get that kind of support, as long as you're involving them and getting them excited about what you're doing. Could you talk a little bit about the financing structure? There's a lot of people who are really interested in, okay, well, how do you finance a movie that's outside of New York and LA? Like, where are you going? How are you putting these pieces together? Is it mostly coming from LA and you're taking the money in, or are you actually being able to get money from where you're shooting? Like, why do you get forced to go to Ohio when you really wanted to shoot in Arkansas?
Yeah. And Ohio was great, by the way. It had lake effect weather that was really good for take shelter. So, and the people that worked on that film were really wonderful people. You know, it is literally the $1 million question. And I'm actually going to start, before I get into specifics about how to, you know, different ways to raise money and do things. I have so many conversations with independent filmmakers that are at that stage. And I ask, like, how much is this budget? And they're like, $1 million. And it just, I think, and most of the times it's like, because somebody told them that movies need to be really expensive. Yeah. I'm like, how are you ever going to spend $1 million? Like, how is that possible? Yeah. Especially now, you know, like, it's one thing to have that conversation in the late 90s or early 2000s where, like, you had to shoot on, and I shot on film, but I shot Shotgun Stories for $52,000 to get it in the can. And we were very specific about how to use that money. I just think, you know, I think a lot of times independent filmmakers equate the size of their budget with the quality of the film that they're making. And I think they're often really nervous about talking to actors, specifically putting offers out to actors, but also other crew and everybody else. Because, you know, crews can be like that too. They can be kind of shitty. They're like, well, what's your budget? And yeah, you know, and that's the person you don't necessarily need on your crew, maybe, you know, go take your union job somewhere and have fun. But like, I think it's really important to say, you have to make your movie for as cheap as possible, not simply because it's easier to get your hands on that, you know, smaller amounts of money, but also because the marketplace is such that to recoup that money is just very, very, very difficult. Even in success, it's very, very, very difficult. And let's all agree that success, and this is a question I often ask people when I'm on that stage of the phone call, is like, well, what do you consider success for your film? And it's really funny because a lot of people, they put so much energy on the idea of getting one made. They don't really think too much about what would success look like? Is it selling to Netflix and kind of being part of the ocean of content that they have, or what would it be? You know, I'm real curious. And if you can be clear and enunciate, like, this is the film festival I want to play at, this is the type of company I want to have buy my film and release it, which Seed&Spark, you guys really nail all of this in your presentations. But like, if you can be very clear about what success is for your film, which ultimately is people get to see it, then you can really manage the cost of that. And if you're staring down the barrel of making your first film, which a lot of the people in the comments are talking about, try your hardest to make it as cheaply as you possibly can. It will only benefit you in the long run. And I swear, there is a culling that happens in terms of crew and cast that, you know, well, maybe if I could just get a little bit more money, I can get that actor. The actor's not going to come to do it because of that money. Not anyone worth anything. they're going to come because of you and because of the screenplay that you're making and the passion that you have for that particular story, and the opportunity that they get to be a part of it. That's what you're selling. And so I think it's really important and when I'm talking, like, I'm saying crank it down, like below $100,000, below $50,000, below $25,000, below $15,000. Like, it's no joke. It's really important, and it will actually force you to create the type of production where I think the majority of people standing around you are very passionate about what you're trying to do. So that's my first big part of that speech. To get money, again, if it's an independent film, I think it is. You are, I'm the wrong guy to talk about it, but you are trying to put together money any way you can, right? So there are lots of other platforms and information about that. When you start to get to a little bit higher level, so Take Shelter, we made, I don't know, the producers would know better than I, but I think around $850,000, $900,000. And so already then for my second film, I've taken that leap that I told you not to take on your first film. So, granted, but that was my second film, and my first film did okay. And I was able to, get that money together, which, by the way, if you look at Take Shelter, that movie should have been a $2 to $3, $4 million movie, so you're still making that for under $1 million. That was a combination of producers who had relationships with financiers that were putting money in. And that I really didn't have much of a relationship with, other than Christos Konstantinopoulos, who was a Greek shipping magnate that put some money in right when we needed it, right before production. But I met him through my producer, Sarah Green. So on Mud was also an independent film, and that movie came from one investment company called Everest, which was chiefly kind of run by a woman out of New York, and who had a significant amount of money. And they were looking for projects, to put money in. I think we made that movie for around $11 million. And that was really one where we did have to go to the state government and say, look, we desperately want to shoot this in Southeast Arkansas. This is what your tax, package looks like. This is what the tax package in Louisiana looks like. We're willing to absorb the cost and trouble of bringing in more crew and housing more crew and all of those exponential costs I mentioned earlier. But if you guys could even just step up to the basic, tax package that Louisiana was offering, we'll make it work. And luckily they did, and I'm very grateful for them for doing that. Yeah.
So can you talk about the role of, so look, I think one of the things that you have done brilliantly in your career is cast your movies perfectly. And a big part of, I cannot say enough good things. I love Michael Shannon, but Jessica Chastain's performance in Take Shelter made the entire movie, the entire concept believable.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like she was able to do tiny things. I told you I was going to fangirl about this movie. I'm obsessed with it. But part of what happens in the success of a movie is that like alchemy that happens on set when you're surrounded by people who are super passionate, and the people who are working on it like really love the material, and you can like dig in as a director, right? Like that alchemy is so important. And I think a lot of people look at your movies and are like, well, how do I get to work with the people that he's worked with exclusively? So could we take a step back again? Because that also relates to financing, and it relates to so many things. Because like
less than people think, actually, but yes.
I don't mean that it earns you, that it gets you a higher budget. Actually, I mean that like your actor's willingness to show up for passion will lower your budget substantially, right? So many people are like,
sure.
What kind of budget do I need to raise to get Angelina Jolie in my movie, or whoever it is? And to your point, it's actually that they have to love the material and be willing to work on this movie, which is going to be this budget, right? But can you talk a little bit about that, process from the start?
Michael Shannon has changed my life and my career. Jessica Chastain is one of the greatest actors in the world. So, I'll double back on that. But like, Michael Shannon was the first one to show up. So that's where I'm gonna start there. And he's shown up for every film. And we remain friends and collaborators. And when so the way I got to Michael Shannon was through a professor in film school. Had worked with him at the Sundance Labs, where they workshop. It was a director's lab, and they were workshopping my professor's script. His name's Gary Hawkins. He was a great professor. And he brought a video cassette of one of those workshop scenes, and Michael Shannon was in it. And I was like, that guy's amazing. So, the only credit I'll take is for having enough sense in my head to watch a Mike Shannon performance and go, well, that's interesting. Which it doesn't take a lot. But not many people had at that point. That was back before, I don't even know if he'd done Pearl Harbor and High Crimes yet. Maybe he had done Kangaroo Jack. Like there weren't a lot of Mike Shannon performances that a lot of people knew about. If you were into the theater community in Chicago, you would probably know him from his Tracy Letts plays, Bug and Killer Joe, which were extraordinary. But he was at the perfect place to still reach out, which is exactly what I did. So when I went to cast Shotgun Stories, I also didn't think I was worthy of having a real actor in my movie that I didn't know or have some family relationship with, which I knew no actors and I had no family relationships. So I remember trying to find somebody that kind of looked like Mike Shannon in like local casting sessions, and it was absurd. It was absurd. And I finally, and this is a good thing, I finally got desperate enough, because I had set this production start date, which is also a huge thing that everyone should do. I set it and we were barreling toward it, and I was like, shit, I gotta do this. I gotta ask this guy. And I got his cell phone number from that professor, and I called him and I said, you don't know me, I'm a kid from Arkansas, but I wrote a lead role for you in my movie. And I don't think a ton of people had done that at that point. And I sent him the script. And in hindsight, Mike has told me since, he's like, I was really going to throw that in the garbage. And for some reason, he read it and he liked it. He gave it to a friend of his who was an acting friend of his in Chicago to read, and was like, am I crazy, or is this actually good? And his friend read it and luckily said, this is actually good. And on that's all Michael needed, And I think there are a lot of actors out there, a lot of actors that you may not think you have access to. And that's really the thing, is like, don't like name actors. That's not really the thing. It's the right actors. Yeah. And because, no one in the greater, audience knew who Jessica Chastain was either when we were making Take Shelter. In fact, that
put her
same
on the
producer,
map. That movie put her on the map. Absolutely.
Well, that and The Help and like 5 others that she had made, in The Tree of Life, which she had filmed before. She came to us, but like, I remember the producer that made me go to Ohio on Take Shelter. He was also like, are we sure about this Jessica Chastain? And like, okay, because he was thinking about name and value, and I was thinking about
performance.
Performance, and trust me, performance always matters more. And I know that's everybody's like, nah, you're crazy, but one, it's all that matters. And I truly believe there are always the right actor for a specific part. And it is your job as a filmmaker to find them.
I was just seeing today on Instagram, because Eliza Hittman is a front runner for Best Director for an Oscar this year, for a film that she made with actors you would probably only know if you were a serious New York theater scene nerd.
Sure.
Right. And Michael Shannon kind of was that for a while. I mean, I remember going to see a play that was a workshop of Little Flower of East Orange at the Black Box Theater upstairs at the Public. Mm-hmm. And there was this incredible arresting actor at the center of the stage, and I could not take my eyes off of him. And it was Michael Shannon and Ellen Burstyn. Yeah. And they were being directed by Philip Seymour Hoffman. And I just remember watching the entire time and being like, who is this? And feeling like I had been hit by a railroad train, which I'm sure is probably what it feels like. And it's so interesting to think about, like, there are those people in every city right now, right?
They absolutely are.
Like
Yeah, absolutely.
trying to make work come hell or high water, right? And they're very interested in great material, because like for the most part, you go out there and what you get to audition for, and I know this because I spent a little bit of time as an actor in New York, like the material is terrible for the most part. So if somebody actually like writes and offers you an amazing role and that turns into an exceptional performance, like that's what film festivals are looking for, that's what distributors are looking for, like that's what audiences are looking for, is just like something really compelling.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you know, I think about how many of the great movies we love were made with actors we didn't know yet.
Yeah, yeah. No, like I think that's the biggest fallacy in all of filmmaking, and it's one that filmmakers suffer from, but also financiers suffer from. And you just have to be, you just have to just overcome it. You just have to literally just say, I know exactly what this needs, and it's this person, and then let everybody, you know, I mean, Ruth Nega walked in. She was the first person we auditioned for Loving, and it was so obvious. It was just so clear that when I sent, you know, footage to the other producers who weren't in the session with us, like it wasn't even like, hey guys, I really want to make this actress work for everybody. It was like, this is it. This is it. And if you tell me, which at some point they did, I can't make the movie for X, I have to make it for Y because of it. Okay. Like, okay, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But it was the right performance, you know? And so, you know, one, you have to be really good at spotting those and understanding them and understanding their value when you see them. Yeah. You know, it's not an easy thing to do necessarily, but you know, I've had this stable of actors that now are all far too successful, but you know, people would inevitably, everyone calls me, it's like, hey, can you get a script to Michael Shannon? And it's like, no, I can't. But but like have, you know, and it used to be like, hey, have you called Paul Sparks or Shea Wiggum or Bill Camp or Scoot McNairy or Jesse Plemons? And it's like, now all of these people are super famous, but had you, you know, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, come to me with those people, and those people are there right now. And it's important to be a student of film, and series television is actually great for it. And you just watch these things and you're looking not at the main actor, you're looking for the person there, and you're like, what is that person doing there? Yep. Because that is very interesting. And 9 times out of 10, that person is actually amazing and incredible, and go get that person. Because just to get into that secondary role on whatever HBO show you're binge watching, they had to be amazing. Yeah. And they've actually probably been doing amazing work for a long time. So and just take confidence in yourself that like you can go find those people. And what's the worst thing they say is no. You know, I had a couple, I get so disappointed. I had a couple of actors that I've reached out to from time, you know, a couple times. I never reach out twice, but like, and to come show up and do something. And whenever I get the answer back of like, no, the money's not there, then I'm so disappointed. And usually 9 times out of 10, that's probably the agent talking, and they never even knew about it. But like, you know, worst thing they say is no, just keep moving.
I love that. I mean, I also love that it's, there's like a spirit of collaboration that you're talking about. Like that truly honors the actors not as objects, but as primary artists. Sure. And I feel like that's something that's kind of missing from the conversation in independent filmmaking, is like, I hear a lot of filmmakers talk about actors as these like assets to obtain in order to secure financing or secure distribution, and not like human artists who also bring their own primary artistry. And go ahead.
Well, sorry. And if you're talking about, you know, regionality as well, like accent to me is massive. And, you know, you're also not reflecting, you know, how many times have we seen the wrong actor in a role trying their damnedest? And there might be a great actor trying their damnedest to do, you know, to fill. And it's not just accent's the most easily accessible, you know, form of this, but it might also be body type or whatever. Like there's so many factors. And there are very, very few actors that can just overcome all of that all of the time. Maybe none. And so, you know, I think it's really important to to hear the voice of your character and work with someone that can bring that voice to you. You know, I knew very specifically, because I'd listened so much to the footage of Richard and Mildred Loving, that they had these really, really period specific accents to, you know, coastal Virginia in the 60s. Like, it sounded like they almost sound like Canadian or something. They would say a boot rather than about, and like all these weird little affectations in their accents. And so that's why I hired actually non-Americans to play those parts. That's exactly why, because I just worked with Joel Edgerton on Midnight Special, and I saw how he handled accent on that. And I was like, he could actually listen to Richard Loving and he could nail that. And Ruth, I mean, off the charts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The rise of the British actor in the US, I do think has something to do with the rigor of the training. Like, I have a bunch of friends in the UK who are actors, and their accent work is nuts. And it makes them so flexible, and like, so they can make a living in like weird voiceover things and animation, and then also can play whatever part you want to. And, you know, and I think about the rigor of skill is also really important. So if you're an actor listening and you think about like, what is the skill set that I want to bring that would really help me be an anchor in my region, right? And as a director, I think what you're talking about, and you're speaking also, Jeff, with like a pretty producerial brain, you're talking about like creating great material and then putting exactly the right people in place, and not letting the story about what success looks like dictate your budget, which might put a bunch of obstacles in your way, for example. And can you talk to me? Somebody asked, there are so many comments now, I actually can't go back and find the ones that I want to do, but can you talk a little bit about like, how do you anchor your productions in the community? How do you make sure, you were talking about sort of like making it better than when you left? Are you bringing on local crew that's like a little bit less experienced, but can get experience in it? How are you?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure at the sound of this answer, there are people in places we shot that are like, I still hate that guy. But like, so sorry to you people. But yeah, you know, on Mud, well, also this is a, you know, producerial answer as well. You inevitably have to. It benefits you to have those local crew so much in terms of budget. But it's, but yeah, you're actively, it happens to overlap with, you know, this kind of philosophy I have, or dream that I have about supporting, you know, local crew and local communities. Anytime, you know, and I've actually watched several people that worked on Mud that were in, you know, what you'd say probably, you know, like starting kind of positions, have gone on to make movies and do stuff. Like, the impact that has is so tremendous. One, you would be a fool as a producer not to take advantage of it. And you know, look, making movies is not rocket science. Like, that first week might be a little bumpy, but you know, like we can all learn how to set up a C-stand. And so I think, although it is, I still have trouble with it actually, but like, it's that little leg, but like, you know, I think you kind of have to, honestly. I think that question kind of takes care of itself, because you know, looking back on Shotgun Stories, I was pulling friends from different worlds and saying, you have to help me do this. You're going to do this. And so you know, that kind of takes care of itself. You just have to, as a filmmaker, you'll do it through necessity anyway, but you have to be open to it, and it's a good thing. It'll help you.
I love that. I think that, again, the sort of passion that you get from someone who's excited to be there every day is tremendous. And it, in my experience, has always resulted in something unexpected and wonderful, and can sometimes be worth some of the bumps. I'm curious, God, there are so many good questions, you guys. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. You were a working filmmaker from early on, but were you earning all of your money from making films? Like, how are you supporting yourself through the Take Shelter the Shotgun Stories Beyond Years.
Well, and Take Shelter. I made $6,000 on Take Shelter. And they didn't pay me till after 3 months after the film was delivered. So, I've made more since then, on some residuals, but not a ton. I was very lucky in Austin. I matched up with an ad agency here called the Butler Bros, and they were extraordinarily generous to me in terms of allowing me to kind of be a freelancer but keeping me working. And so I would do anything for them. I would write for them. I would shoot for them, edit for them, direct for them. I had taught myself on Shotgun Stories how to edit on Final Cut Pro back when I really loved Final Cut Pro. And they changed it on me, and it's ruined my editing skills.
Nobody's happy about it, as far as I know. Nobody's happy about it. Yeah. Adobe was like, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Finally they screwed up. But I guess you hear be a jack of all trades, which sure. And I was able to find a group that allowed me to make just enough money to kind of keep my head above water and pump stuff back into my projects when possible. The reality, though, honestly, the reality of making Take Shelter in 2010 was because in 2008, I had sold a pilot idea or a series idea to HBO for the first time. And that was my first paycheck ever. And it was a series that never got picked up, and I wrote the pilot for it. But oh man, I thought I was the biggest badass ever because I had sold this idea to HBO. But that money allowed me to go make Take Shelter. And I remember after Take Shelter, and this is kind of maybe a second half of your question, because the first half is really, I worked in an ad agency, but a really great one. And after Take Shelter, I remember my agent calling me because it got a really good reaction out of Sundance. And he was like, they're offering you, I guess I can say it now. They're offering you the remake of Poltergeist. And I was like, I just made Poltergeist and it's called Take Shelter. But okay, sure. And they've done it. They went and did it. And they, I think, listened to me, because the one thing I said, I was like, you should cast Rosemary DeWitt as the mother. And they did. I have no idea if that was because of me. But I remember at some point they kept offering me more and more money to do it. And at some point, I think they offered me $1 million. And this is, to be clear, I was just broke, so broke. But we were getting traction on Mud. We were getting traction on Mud because of Take Shelter. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I think they thought I was negotiating, but I was really like, no, I want to go make this movie Mud. And they were confused. They were confused, why any rational human being would want to go make this obscure coming of age movie when you're offering, that's a Poltergeist that's a crown jewel friend, that's awesome. But it was just so clear to me, again, kind of like going to film school or anything else. It was just kind of no, I want to make this movie. I've been thinking about this movie for 10 years. Why wouldn't I want to make this movie? And get paid a fraction of that to make that movie. And I think those decisions matter. I've been real lucky, though. I've been real lucky that they've worked out. Mud ended up working. And it very easily could not have worked, and I'd be kicking myself, why didn't I take that? But this is going to sound super, super pretentious. But I've seen my films kind of a bit of as a brand. And there's a quality of workmanship that I try to put into them that I don't want to compromise. And I think, although I'm not a gazillionaire, which maybe I could be right now if I'd said yes to some other things, I think actors really respect me. Most of the ones I've worked with, I think, and as a result, other actors really respect me. And so it's this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of casting and other things. Like I get to have really great conversations with a lot of different actors, and my crew really respect. My crew has made way more money on other people's films than mine. But they're real loyal and they want to work with me. And I think it's because I genuinely, care about the things that I'm trying to work on. Now that calculus could absolutely change in the next 5 years. We'll see if it has to. I've been really lucky to keep my standard of living pretty much in check, and so that's allowed me to make some of these decisions.
Right.
But I think it's. Well, I'm actually going to tie this into what should have been part of the original answer when you were talking to me about the first question about the kind of the trajectory of getting here. As much as coming to the realization that this is possible in a place where there is no ready example. The closest we had was Billy Bob Thornton with Sling Blade, which that movie changed my life in a lot of ways too, just watching that as an example. And I thought it was such an extraordinary film. But a much bigger thing also happens simultaneously, which is you start to figure out what kind of storyteller you want to be. What are the things that you feel like you want to say to the world? Because whether it is a 2-hour feature film or a 10-part series or whatever it is now, or whatever is on TikTok, which I don't watch, you're saying something about yourself when you create these stories. And I think it's important to challenge yourself with the question of what am I trying to say? What do I want to say? And is there value in it? Even if it's simply entertainment value, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to make people laugh? Am I trying to make people feel emotional about a certain thing or think about a certain issue? It is really important for all of us as storytellers to be able to enunciate that, and you need to enunciate it while you're making your movie. And I've gotten better at it, I think. But that is kind of the second half of that equation in terms of really coming to believe in the idea of being a storyteller, and it needed to be said.
I mean, I don't want to mess with what you just said by following up with a question, because I think that's the core of all of it. And it's so simple in a way, but also kind of the hardest question, which is what do I want to say and why?
Yeah.
Right. Who am I doing it for?
It puts you out on a limb for sure. And it's really easy in this society today to just be one of the people sitting back and judging and commenting on things, and fine, if that's the life you want to live, but when you make something, you really are saying I believe in this enough. Somebody sent me a script the other day, and I think they were trying to be coy, but I texted back and I was like, well, do you like it? And they were like, ooh, ouch, I don't know. And it was wrong answer. I'm not that's a bad answer. You need to really know, because you're asking a lot of people, you're asking for their time, not just in making it, but watching it. And it is very dangerous, it's really dangerous, especially now in this world. It's very dangerous to say, I believe this, I think this.
Yeah.
Now more than ever, it's extraordinarily, it's a tricky thing to do, but we have to. That's our job. That's why when you're successful, you do get paid a bunch of money and stuff, because there are a lot of people out there that aren't willing to do it.
I have loved this so much. I really, and you're sending me off into the rest of my vacation, and this is such a beautiful place to go, because I feel like I'm flitting off into the universe with a lot of creative inspiration, which is something when your life is busy. And as I have small children, you have a child, the world is actually collapsing around us. And it's important to remember, like, we really have to feed ourselves as artists. We have to take space from that place of judgment, right? And honestly, you know, what you see in these is that we mostly struggle with judging ourselves, right?
Sure.
And so we can sort of internalize that external voice of judgment over time. But this is such a beautiful place to land. And thank you for helping us deliver on the promise of a creative sustainability session, because I really do feel like these messages are what help people sustain their creativity. So thank you. This has just been incredible, and you've been so generous. And I want to talk to you guys about a couple of things. The Arkansas Cinema Society is an important fixture in Arkansas, and your support. There are a lot of Arkansans. Did I do that right?
Yes.
Yes. There are a lot of Arkansans listening right now, watching right now, and it's really you have to be the lifeblood behind making this thing possible. So please follow the Arkansas Cinema Society, figure out how you can help. Catherine is like one of the best people on the planet, and her team is incredible. You just have to, you know, and supporting the Arkansas. So supporting the Arkansas Cinema Society from outside of Arkansas is also important, because we need these things to exist everywhere. To wit, these creative sustainability sessions are all provided completely for free. And if the resource that you had to contribute to this was your time today and to make this investment in yourself, that's wonderful. If perchance you have a few dollars to spare to help us pay it forward so that we can continue to provide these for free, we will drop a link in the chat. And if you have signed up for this through the Eventbrite, we can send you. But if you can go to learn.seedandspark.com/contribute, and chip in even $1. It makes it possible for us to do these all the time. There is a ton of incredible programming coming up. If you are interested in who are the actors you should be paying attention to, we have an actors roundtable coming up. We have an amazing session with a director based out of Atlanta, so can talk more about creating outside of the coast, Lisa Cunningham. And weekly lunch and learns. If you go to seedandspark.com/events, there's amazing places to go. And Jeff, do you have something to send us off with? Maybe, since you're a writer, something that is either a useful tip or something that's really exciting to you. Could even be a book recommendation.
You know, so that professor I mentioned in college, he made a documentary series called The Rough South, and he made a documentary about Larry Brown, who's a writer that sadly has passed away, from Oxford, Mississippi. And I was fortunate enough to work on that documentary in college, and I got to go watch how Larry Brown wrote. And Larry Brown didn't start writing, I think, until way late in life, late 30s, early 40s. He bagged groceries. He had, built fence line. He was a fireman at one point, and and actually he did the majority of his writing when he became a fireman, and he would write at night. And even when he had stopped being a fireman and was just a full-time writer, he kept that schedule. And what he said was, when he wrote his first book, I think it was called The Bear, which was never published, and it was about like campers getting eaten by this bear in the woods. He was like, you would have no choice other than to say I was not talented. And he was like, you couldn't help but read that and say that. And he approached writing the same way that he approached building a fence or bagging groceries or being a fireman. And he just worked at it until I, to this day, consider him one of the greatest short story writers that America has ever produced. And you should find Big Bad Love, which is a series of short stories that he wrote. But that's what I think about writing. I don't think any of us are necessarily geniuses, but it is actually possible to write your way to maybe someday being considered one. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very happy Friday to everyone. I hope you have a restful weekend. Yes. And Jeff, Arkansas Cinema Society, thank you for being our partner in this and for sharing this. And we got to such an incredible place at the end of this that I'm probably going to come back to you again and ask to do this again, because I want to dig even deeper next time. That was really lovely. Thank you so much.
glad to be here. Everybody stay safe and go vote.
Yes. Vote.
All right.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.